This is Peter Helland on the show Israel, and we have a international traveler. We're here in South Bend on the local Channel 99 public access channel, and of course you know this. We put it up on YouTube, and but when you went to Tehran, and you were at a kind of a significant conference, and I didn't see that in the South Bend Tribune. Nothing. No. I didn't see a thing. So it's good that we can be on the local TV here and talk about your trip, which was fairly significant. But it's also interesting, as you went to Iran, Cardinal Burke, who you know, has come out recently and is saying a controversial statement, it's a popular statement, that the Muslims and the Christians do not worship the same God. A lot of people hold to that.
Yes. So does that mean he's a polytheist? Is Cardinal Burke a polytheist? There's more than one God? Is it possible that there can be more than one God? You tell me.
Not for a practicing Jew, and not for a Muslim or a Christian.
It can't be. It's not possible. It's not possible metaphysically. Let's get beyond confessional statements here. We're talking about the creator and sustainer of the universe. There can only be one of these people, okay? There can only be one God, okay? We've been through periods, there are primitive religions that believe in many, but basically the human race has grown beyond that thing. There's a consensus among the world's religions that there's one God, okay? So I found myself dumbfounded. To be perfectly honest with you, I am dumbfounded by this statement. How can a cardinal of the Catholic Church say something like this? Okay, I'm at a loss. Now I know there's a big fight going on between Cardinal Burke and the Pope. I'm not taking sides in that fight. I helped Cardinal Burke out. We're the same age. I helped him out when he was Bishop of La Crosse, because we published an article against Nisida and the phony seer there that helped him to keep people from going to this shrine, this phony apparition. So I've got nothing against the guy, but when you make a statement like this, what exactly are you saying here? What are you saying? Are you saying that isn't this? It seems to me I'm at a loss for words here, because the statement is so crude. Obviously, there's only one God. There can be only one God. If there's only one God and people around the world are worshiping that God, we are all worshiping the same God. That's obvious. It cannot be any other way. Now, if His Eminence wanted to say that we have different understandings of that God, well, then of course I can agree with that. But that, it seems to me, bespeaks a kind of lack of philosophical sophistication that I find appalling, especially among Catholics who should know better, and especially among Catholic prelates who should know even better than the average Catholic.
Well, if he was here, he may actually clarify that point. He may say, well, I think you misunderstood me, or the media misunderstood me.
Right.
I'm saying that we have differences.
Right, and everything is predicated on the accuracy of the reports that we've gotten. So maybe he said something completely different. If so, we'll have him on and we'll issue a retraction and we can ask him what he really thinks, okay? Wisconsin's not that far away, right? I know he's not bishop there anymore, but we can have him on. But I think he meant what he said. And I think he actually is saying, because it is a widespread erroneous position among a certain kind of Catholic. And there's this element of, I mean, I don't want to be judgmental here, but there seems to be an element of pandering going on here. You know, are you playing to a certain crowd by saying this kind of thing? Well, if so, the crowd is not the Wisconsin crowd, okay? Because you come from Wisconsin. The last time I drove through La Crosse, I didn't see any Muslims.
No, there really wasn't any blacks when I grew up in La Crosse either.
I saw no camels. I saw nothing Islamic whatsoever. So it's obviously not an issue, and I think we can extrapolate and say immigration may be a problem in the United States, but Muslim immigration is not a problem here. It's not a problem. It may be a problem in Serbia, it may be a problem in Germany, and so on and so forth. I can understand that, but it's not a problem here. So why are we talking this way? Why are we talking this way? All it does is spread ill will. I mean, one of the things you go, I've been, it's not the first time I've been to Iran. We attended this conference. I've been there before. I was in Qom, at the mosque in Qom, and there are all these people, all walking into the mosque. Well, they're worshiping God. Now, their understanding of God is different than my understanding, but to say they're not worshiping God is preposterous.
Well, they hold to the 10 Commandments.
Well, I don't even want to get into that. I don't even want to get into that. I don't care what they believe. Obviously, their beliefs are different than mine. Obviously, I think my understanding, or let's say the understanding of the Catholic Church, I think is superior to the Islamic understanding of God. Because if I thought Islam was superior, I'd become a Muslim. Okay? So obviously, I think it's superior, but I'm not going to say they're not worshiping God. That's preposterous. What are you trying to say? There's this kind of, the absolute worst kind of cultural myopia that gets generated in places like America where you say this kind of stuff, and it's not a problem here.
Well,
it's not a problem.
The next thing they're going to say once that's established, then people say that the Muslims worship Satan. Don't some people say that? I'm sure
there are people out there who would make this claim. I've heard other religions make claims about the same thing. Okay. You're one step away from that. You're one step away from that. So the point here is that we as Christians, we as Catholics have a tradition that allows us a more sophisticated way of talking about things than His Eminence exhibited in this article. Okay? We have the Gospel of St. John. Okay, this is a powerful metaphysical document, metaphysical principles here in a simple kind of narrative. I'm talking about the beginning of the Gospel of St. John. En arche en ha logos. First of all, it's written in Greek, which is a powerful language, more powerful philosophically than any other language on earth, I would say. Okay, because we got the idea of philosophy from the Greeks. They were the ones who discovered it. Okay? And here you're beginning to see the difference between Islam and Christianity. Christianity had the good fortune of having St. John write one of its seminal documents down in Greek, which, as Pope Benedict said, incorporated all of Greek philosophy into the Christian religion, which was a tremendous benefit. Unlike Islam, which wrote its scriptures down in Arabic. Arabic does not have the philosophical sophistication that the Greek language has. So they're handicapped there.
You said in the article, you pointed out these Arabic words that don't go to any substance.
Well, they don't have, yes. And in a sense, I mean, it's not just Arabic. I mean, English is problematic in this regard because there's no word for logos in English, which is why I keep using the word logos. Because we don't have an equivalent. We have words that are based on it, like biology and logic and all this other type of stuff. They're based on it. And if you took all of those ology words, all those words, and you put them all together and you came up with the common denominator, that would be logos. That's why you have to use this word, because we don't have a word. And the classic example of misunderstanding or obscurity is the Gospel of St. John being translated into English. Because the first sentence, the sentence I just said, is, in the beginning there was the Word.
Right, and the Word...
Now, what does that mean? I mean, I've been a Christian for my entire life, and I've been reading the Gospel ever since I knew how to read, and I can't figure out what that means. I could never figure out what that meant.
In the earlier Masses, before Vatican II, you actually that was part of the Mass, wasn't it? In the beginning was the Word?
But it doesn't do it in Latin either. It's in principio erat verbum. Well, that's just word. That's what it means. And it doesn't mean logos, because logos is a Greek word, and all of the baggage that comes with it is only in Greek. So this is the issue here. Okay? We have this tremendous advantage. We have this philosophical patrimony, and we're not using it. I'm sorry, Your Eminence, but you're not using it. So when you make a stupid statement like that, you're betraying your entire tradition here. So what does it say? En arche ein ha logos. In the beginning there was logos. Okay? And then it says, and logos was God. All right, this is incredibly profound. We could spend hours talking about this, but basically what you're talking about from a metaphysical point of view is that when you're talking about the beginning, you're talking about God, and God is there at the beginning, and this can be known by the mind. We are just talking about revelation, but what we mentioned here can be known by the human mind independently of revelation.
Well, logos, you get the word logical, and somebody say that's logical. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay? That is part of the word logos.
Yes.
And God's a God of order.
That's right.
Okay? So you put these pieces together, you can see kind of the whole. And I think that's what the Greek language, and that's what the early church fathers...
And that's what the patrimony of the Catholic Church is they rescued Greek philosophy from the Greeks. Because Greek philosophy, left on its own, degenerated into magic. That's what Neoplatonism is. That's how Al-Farabi knew Plato. He knew it through Neoplatonism, which is basically magic and mumbo-jumbo and the type of stuff that Julian the Apostate wanted to get involved in when he got involved in his attack on the church. So the Catholic Church rescued Logos from the Greeks and has continued this tradition up to this day. Okay? Now, what is the advantage of being logical or having Logos? Well, you can talk to each other, because that's one of the meanings of Logos. It's language. It's not just word, but it's language. And what you realize now is that the human being is a creature who has a language. There is no such thing as a human being without a language.
Well, if Cardinal Burke was here, you could demand of him that his position be logical, and you could demand of him a defense.
I hope he watches this YouTube video. I'm a friend of Cardinal Burke, but I'm a greater friend of the truth. Okay? I'm a friend of Plato and Aristotle, but I'm a greater friend of the truth.
But
the fact that we're talking about this is a sign of our superiority to other levels of creation. Okay? Now, this does not mean that it's mandatory. All right, wait a minute. It does mean that it's mandatory, but it doesn't mean that it works all the time. And so what you see in human history is basically the failure of Logos. In a sense, when people fail repeatedly to say what they mean, to understand the situation, to act according to reason. And when the ultimate failure is known as war.
Yeah, I mean, the only example we get is Jesus when he was 12. He went into the temple and he was engaging in discourse. He was listening and asking questions, and they said, his parents came to him and said, what have you done to us? And he says, I have to be about my Father's business, or I have to be in my Father's house, depending on the translation. And then you see Paul reasoning from the scriptures in the synagogues.
Absolutely, and not only that, but he said in the epistle to the Romans that these people knew, they could see in the heavens that there was some type of logic out there, and they turned their backs on it, and God handed them over to their own disgusting desires. In other words, they became homosexuals. Homosexuality is a symptom of lack of belief, okay? The classic example being Michel Foucault, the French philosopher who was baptized a Catholic, who turned away from reason and ended up screwing himself to death in the bathhouses of San Francisco in the 1980s. But died of AIDS in 1984.
You also suggested that the component with reasoning is the will's involved, courage is involved.
Yes. So okay, but we have to have the proper hierarchy. And now we're dealing with the issue of Islam. Okay? So, as I said, the Christianity adopts Greek as its language. Islam adopts Arabic and imposes Arabic on the entire world that it conquers, okay? Christianity spent the first, let's say, 312 years till the Edict of Constantine, ruling no one. They were a despised minority. They were just lucky to survive for the most part, okay? But what they did do is they talked to each other. And they exhibited this ability, this logos, because they got together and had things called ecumenical councils, a number of them, at which they hammered out all the basic terms of Christianity, all the basic understandings of Christianity.
Do you think, as we see, like Jesus was in the temple, Paul's reasoning in the temple, that the first 300 years of Christianity, the churches there had more reasoning amongst themselves and discussions and debates.
How are we going to measure this? I mean,
I'm just saying today.
All I'm saying is that they did it, okay? And there were heresies and there were fights and there were battles, but ultimately they resolved it by reason, okay? Islam is a completely different story, okay? The prophet dies, okay? And then we have 4 caliphs who succeed the prophet. And all they do is fight with each other. And the 4th caliph, do I have this straight? The 4th caliph, 3rd caliph, Ali, who is the son-in-law of the prophet, is murdered by his fellow Muslims.
Is that where you get Muhammad Ali from that?
Yes.
Okay.
That is where you get it.
Okay.
Okay. And this battle, the feelings were so hard at this point that it created a split in Islam that is perdured to this day, namely the Sunni Shia split, which only got exacerbated when Hussein, the prophet's grandson,
was martyred.
The prophet used to play with his grandson, Hussein, and Hussein is murdered by fellow Muslims. And this leads to the biggest pilgrimage on the face of the earth, the pilgrimage of Karbala in Iraq, where the city was located, where the Shia come and they used to, I don't know whether they still do, but they flog themselves and repenting. They're called the repenters because they weren't there to save Hussein from his murderers. Okay, this is from the beginning of Islam, the very moment of its inception, they're fighting with each other, and they haven't stopped. And so what happens here is you have the caliph, whose name escapes me at the moment, 692. He basically imposes order by military force on Islam, and he says, okay, 692, we're going to put an end to the discussion by force, and we're going to limit the number of Qurans to 7.
A divine number.
There are only 7 Qurans, okay? And anybody who says there are 8, we're going to chop their head off. Now, these 7 Qurans contradict themselves, okay? But that's okay because we're going to enforce this. Now, what you see here is the problem, in a sense, with Islam. Okay, you have a group of people who are incredibly powerful warriors who sweep across Africa like a hot knife through butter, all the way up to the Pyrenees until Charles Martel stops them from coming into France. I mean, the world has never seen a conquest like this before. So they conquer the entire world, but they can't talk to each other. And so what the caliph does then is imposes peace by force. And what that does is preserve resentment. And as I said, the resentment among the Shia exists to today.
Because
and vice versa.
Peace by force, then you have to kill people, and they get resentful.
I can force you to accept something, but you're going to be full of resentment.
But they don't know anything different. That's the way it's.
Well, that you could say that was the case, but now it's a different world we live in now.
You're right.
Because we're all part of the same world, and now this began in earnest at World War I.
Breakup of the Ottoman.
Basically, when Churchill and his buddies decided they're going to break up the Ottoman Empire, and this is the story where we get Lawrence of Arabia. T.E. Lawrence is the James Bond of World War I. He gets sent down to the Arabian Peninsula. The Turks are not Arabs, okay? The Turks and the Arabs have this antipathy toward each other, and the English love the idea of divide and rule. That's the way they've done it for the entire length of the British Empire. So Lawrence is dispatched down there to create an Arab uprising against the Sublime Porte, the Caliph in the Ottoman Empire.
Because the Turks and the Germans are allied, and so this is a war.
Yes, and so this is one of the great alliances of World War I. So how do the British deal with this? How do they deal with this? Well, they deal with it by force because this is a war, okay? And the head of the army is Horatio Kitchener, the hero of Omdurman. Omdurman was an uprising, a Muslim uprising in Africa, in the Sudan. He called himself the Mahdi, which means the return of the Imam. Okay, he's got an army of 30,000 men on camels and 50,000 men on horseback, and they charge, riding their camel, waving their scimitar, charge right into Kitchener's Maxim guns, the machine gun, and he mows them down. And this made a huge impression on Churchill, who was there writing up the story for the newspapers, and it made a huge impression on Kitchener, and he became the hero of Omdurman. Okay, and this was the status quo of Europe versus the rest of the world. Europe had superior technology, and they put it in the service of basically looting the entire world, otherwise known as colonialism. Okay, the problem is that these military differentials are ephemeral. They are ephemeral. And so what happened this was 1898. 1915, we're in the middle of World War I, and the Germans and the Turks hold the Dardanelles, okay, the Bosphorus, the narrow waterway between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. So what's their solution? They were formed by watching that Battle of Omdurman.
And the Germans found a solution.
Yeah, well, they didn't know the Germans were there. And they thought, well, we're dealing with WOGs, right? They were the WOGs back then, and now they were the WOGs of the Sudan. Now they're the same, different kind of WOG, but they're still WOGs. And so how do you deal with WOGs? You crush them with your Maxim gun. Well, the problem was that they lost the edge. And so basically, they send the battleships. The British Navy is going to force its way through the Dardanelles, and guess what? You can't do it. They had, the British Navy had one of their new ships, the Queen Elizabeth, 14-inch guns. No, 15-inch guns. Okay, that means you can fire on the enemy. You can hit a target 14,400 yards away. And they've got 12-inch guns, and they can't reach you. So you can just fire away, and they can't even touch you.
6 miles. About 6 miles.
No, it's 10 miles. It's 14,000 yards.
Yeah, and 2,500.
Well, 1,500 yards is roughly 1,600 is a mile. So let's say 9 miles. Firing away from 9 miles away. Okay. Well, the problem is, we're going through the straits here. The straits mean you don't have an advantage. So as soon as the British ships get into the straits, the artillery opens up from both sides, and they are destroyed. It's the biggest defeat in British naval history. One ship goes down after another. The French ship goes down. Even if they had gotten through the artillery barrage, there were mines. There were cables with sea mines, and they were sinking ships, so they had to back away. So here you have the problem, okay? The military situation had changed. And what I'm saying now, what I derived from talking to people in Iran, is that the situation has changed again. So what is the military situation? What is military history in a nutshell? Okay, you have the cavalry charge. You have the machine gun. The machine gun trumps the cavalry charge every day of the week. Okay, the machine gun is the state-of-the-art weapon in World War I, but both sides have machine guns, so you have a standoff, which is trench warfare, which is stalemate, which is the story of World War I. So what's the solution to the machine gun? It's called the tank. Okay, but the problem is you can't really develop. They had some tanks, primitive tanks, but they weren't good enough. By the time Hitler gets to power, the tank has been turned into a massively effective weapon, and they just, as I said, cut through the Maginot Line like a hot knife through, or just go around it. They went around it. Okay? Now, that changed again. And when did that change? That changed in 2006.
Yeah, because you talked about in your story that they invaded Lebanon, Israel did.
Israel invades Lebanon. Israel has the invincible Merkava tank. The Merkava tank gets 500 yards in, and Hezbollah destroys them.
Because Russia had a new weapon.
They've got missiles now. And you've got anti-tank missiles, and so the tank is obsolete. This is a new shift in warfare. And not only is the tank obsolete, I think we have to conclude, although it hasn't been proven yet, that the aircraft carrier is obsolete. The aircraft carrier made the battleship obsolete, and now the missile has made the aircraft carrier obsolete. The proof I will give for this is...
You talked about those small ships. Yeah.
Right. That when Russia entered the war in Syria, they fired cruise missiles from little ships in the Caspian Sea. What's the first American reaction to that? They pulled the entire aircraft carrier.
They chickened out and left.
They took the aircraft carrier out of the Persian Gulf. This is a tacit admission that basically we don't know. We don't know. And I'm saying right now, as we were speaking, we have the current political moment here, which is Trump versus the deep state.
The deep state, some people here locally don't.
Deep state, CIA, all of the oligarchs, we've used terms like this before, all of these people taken together, the people who are not elected but still run the whole operation, you know, from behind the scenes and use the elected official as their puppets. This is known as the deep state. And we've talked about this before, but basically the 2016 election, Trump actually getting elected in spite of the fact that all of the oligarchs were against him, has led to a civil war, which is basically the deep state trying to depose Trump. So the first move on their part was this ridiculous fake news operation known as P-Gate, or Trump in a
compromised position.
Compromised position. This is PG rated here, so we won't go into details. In a hotel in St. Petersburg. Trump calls their bluff. Well, they don't have any proof, and so the whole thing collapses. This was confected by renegade CIA agents who went to work for Hillary Clinton and were still trying to do it. It's still happening. And the latest, the first casualty of the Trump administration was Michael Flynn. And I'm saying, I mean, this is sort of what you gather when you sit down, you talk to these people over a period of time, is that it wasn't Russia. That's not the reason that Flynn had to go. It was Iran. It was Iran. Because what did the first thing out of Michael Flynn's mouth is he puts Iran on notice because Iran fired a missile. Because
you point out that Trump was not being too smart because he just seemed to gravitate to the opposite position that Obama had.
Right. That's we're seeing all of Trump's faults in glaring detail right now. Now that he's got the position of power, now that he can do something, he's doing all the wrong stuff when it comes to the Middle East. He is absolutely clueless about the Middle East, and the fact that the proof of it is these people that he's appointing.
So he didn't get the best advisors. Is that one reason?
Well, first of all, he's cut himself off from the advice from the people who are supposed to be his advisors. CIA means Central Intelligence Agency, right? That's what they're supposed to be. They're a covert warfare operation, but they're supposed to give you intelligence. Well, he's at war with the CIA, so he can't listen to these people. So he's got to do it on his own. Well, he's making mistakes. Flynn was a mistake. All these guys are mistakes because they don't understand the magnitude of the situation here. Okay.
Okay.
They understand one thing. Israel does not like Iran. I get it. Okay, we know that. That's not a reason to form America's foreign policy with that as the sole principle.
But you said in your article the reason they don't like Iran, they're the unmoved. You give them an Aristotelian term.
Yes, back to metaphysics here.
Yeah, the unmoved mover, or
right.
something. Like that.
They are the unmoved mover.
Israel can't move them out because Israel has designs on the whole Middle East.
Israel wants to conquer the entire Middle East, and so basically, the unmoved mover. What does that mean? When you build a bridge, okay, you can have an infinite number of bricks or whatever. But unless you get something like bedrock and you put the bricks on, the bridge isn't going to hold up. And that's what Iran was in the Middle East. It is the thing that has maintained resistance to Israel in spite of everything. And the main reason we have a war in Syria is because there's a Shia crescent. Begins with Iran, Iraq, which became a Shia country. This is the cunning of reason. Okay, the United States invades Iraq, and you can hear the cheering from Iran because they deposed Saddam Hussein, who was the enemy of Iran, and now it's a Shia country. Okay, and then we have Syria, who the Alawites are friendly to the the Shia, and then you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then Hezbollah supports Hamas in Palestine. So you have this encirclement on the north of Israel that is preventing Israel from breaking out and destroying. So the whole goal of American foreign policy was to break up this arc by destroying Syria. And it hasn't worked. And I'm saying it's not going to work. So what happens? So what happens immediately, as you know, within days of this whole operation, Netanyahu shows up in Washington. First guy through the door. Okay, he's got to be Benjamin Netanyahu.
That grew up a mile from you.
Yeah, we both
went to school.
We went to high school a mile away from each other. Benjamin Netanyahu shows up, and Benjamin Netanyahu's on the ropes. There's a corruption investigation going on. The best thing that ever happened to Benjamin Netanyahu is the election of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is the anti-Obama. That's about as sophisticated as we're going to get here. So he comes, and initially it looks as if it was unusual because they had the press conference before the meeting. Usually it's the other way around. They have a meeting and then the press conference. So the story is that we're going to talk about settlements. Trump has this kind of weird gesture where he says, and I think we'd like to hold off on settlements, wouldn't we? That doesn't sound like the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And Netanyahu goes, yeah, like the thug that he is. That's not the story that I was hearing in Iran. The story I heard in Iran was basically that Netanyahu wanted a green light to invade Lebanon.
To redeem his name.
To avenge 2006. We've already talked about 2006. To avenge the defeat of the Israeli army in 2006. And got the green light, and Hassan Nasrallah heard about it. And so the next day, Hassan Nasrallah holds his press conference. This is the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and he says basically, you invade, we take out Dimona. Dimona is the Israeli nuclear reactor. Because we now have the weaponry to take out Dimona. So what you see here is exactly what I was talking about with the British and the Dardanelles, okay?
Now we've got technology while you were sleeping.
While there was this gap here. The civil war going on in the United States provided this moment of opportunity, or let's say the failure to destroy Syria. There's been a pipeline, and the weapons have been going to Hezbollah. You know, that hasn't changed, and the sophistication of the weapons has increased, and now they are claiming that they can take out their nuclear reactor.
And Dimona has a history of its own, right? I mean, that symbolizes Israel's power.
Yeah, we can go. There's a whole long story about Dimona and, you know, them denying. Anyways, that's for another show.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that what happened here is that the balance of power has shifted. And in a sense, the departure of Flynn is basically an admission of that fact. Because they're saying now, I mean, I think there are still grown-ups out there in the deep state. I think there are grown-ups somewhere in the CIA or in the military. Admiral Fallon was a grown-up.
They can think logically and go.
They're not simply stooges of the Israel lobby here who are just, you know, like stooges. Who do I mean? John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and our illustrious former senator from Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum, the chest-thumping Catholic, who starts talking about, at Notre Dame, starts telling us how he has 8 kids before he gets into his act, which is basically bomb, 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 bomb Iran.
That's normally McCain.
That's the only song. It's the only song this guy ever knew, and the people of Pennsylvania got tired of him and voted him out of office. I was in Guam, and I kept thinking of Rick Santorum when I'm walking along the street in Guam. These people would die. They would die. For what? Because he wanted Jew money? Now he's working for the American Enterprise Institute. This is scandalous. There's a Catholic to do this kind of stuff? It's a scandal.
Well, he's being an American, and part of America's mission, its identity, was to help create Israel and support Israel. It's part of their religious.
Well, times have changed, and now we got to bring about a change here because, folks, the world has changed, okay? And guess what did not happen after Hassan Nasrallah said this about his missiles. Israel did not invade Lebanon. I don't think they're going to. I think those days are over. This is why I'm saying that the situation has changed. So I'm saying, okay, great, the situation has changed because it was a bad situation to begin with, because what will always, you can't talk to the Israelis, or you can't talk to these Israelis because they don't believe in Logos. Jews do not believe in Logos. You could say the Muslims didn't really grasp it, but Jews rejected it when they rejected Jesus Christ. And they've been that way ever since. And Israel is a manifestation of this hatred of Logos. Okay? These are the people, you got the Bible there, these are the people who killed Christ. And they are enemies of the entire human race. And if you ever need empirical proof of that, look at the way Israel behaves.
But following that philosophical point that you're arguing, that we need to get back to this philosophical concept of logos, and we've gone off. America has followed kind of the will, like Nietzsche, and the Israelis.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is
and
the
it's
great
a dead end.
This is the great irony. Okay, the great irony of the West. Okay, what happened to Islam? Okay, they could not talk to each other. Okay, I hope my Muslim friends are listening here. I hope my Iranian friends are listening here. But this is simply a fact. They could not talk to each other, and so you had a peace imposed by military force. Okay, and as a result of the defeat of the Mu'tazilites, the Asherites took power, and the Asherites believe that Allah is pure will, and there doesn't need to be any logos in Allah. Now, this is a crude distortion of the nature of God, okay? But what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about projecting the image, the idea of the caliph onto God. God is an exalted caliph. Well, no, he isn't. That's man. You're projecting your misunderstanding onto God, and not only that, you're making your misunderstanding normative for the Islamic world. Well, that's not a good idea. And so as a result, you had the collapse of Islamic philosophy. Okay, and you have these people in their 1,000-year slumber, off by themselves, just doing what they're doing, okay?
But you specifically said it began when they had the conflict between Aristotle saying the earth is eternal.
That's, yeah, Ibn Rushd, I mean, there are a number of crises, but Ibn Rushd had Aristotle before the Christians did, 200 years before Aquinas got Aristotle, and he's confronted with the contradiction. That Aristotle says that the earth is eternal, the Quran says it's created. Well, how do you resolve this? Well, he says, well, they're both right. And at that point, that's the end of Islamic philosophy, because you violated the principle of non-contradiction. The story of Al-Farabi is another story. It's always the same story. The interesting thing that just occurred to me during the writing of this thing is that the occultation, the 12th Imam, goes into the state of occultation 1 year after the birth of al-Ash'ari, the man who killed Islamic philosophy.
Because of that, he violated the law of non-contradiction.
No, Ibn Rushd did, but al-Ash'ari is the other guy. He's the one who he turns against reason completely and comes up with an ideology of basically that God is pure will and God is an exalted caliph. Well, now we're in a situation where the world has changed. You're not living all by yourself in the desert anymore. We're all part of one world, and so this chaos that the American empire has created by following Israel has now led to a thirst for logos.
Right. Well, even like in my own family, my brother-in-law, an ex-brother-in-law, is married to an Iranian. I mean, so we're intermingled, and
right.
They're constantly.
Right.
We're constantly.
Allah brought me to Iran for a reason. We have to meet. And what I'm proposing is, we speak English. This is the cunning of reason. The British Empire was an evil thing. The American Empire is even more evil than the British Empire. But the good that has come out of it is the spread of the English language throughout the world. Now that's a good thing. Now the problem is that English has baggage. Just Arabic has baggage, Greek has baggage, English has baggage, and the baggage of English is the English ideology, Darwin, David Hume, the Scottish Enlightenment. It's not sophisticated philosophically. It's stupid.
Well, like you said, and you had a point here that Scripture helps guide philosophy, but you're saying the English ideology.
The English ideology is basically the Reformation, and it's based on theft. England is the place that stole the property of the Catholic Church, and they made a religion out of their theft, and that religion is known as capitalism. And capitalism is now the default setting for the entire world. Well, it's not going to work. It's not going to bring peace. If it hasn't brought peace now, it's not going to bring peace now. And so what we need to do is break through. Obviously, I'm glad that we can speak English. Okay, I'm glad that there is a universal language, but what now we need is a philosophical lingua franca, and you're not going to get it from England. Not there. Not there. You're not going to get it from America because they don't have it. You have a language that is basically geared toward commerce, to facilitate commerce. And commerce is not a high level of human interaction.
Well, America is kind of the biggest promoter of the English language, and America, its constitution, its founding, ended up being centered around commerce.
Right. And that is, it is what it is. We can't change it. It's the form of America, and we have to just suffer through it. But I mean, what we need to say is this is not adequate. This philosophical the philosophical baggage that comes with English is not adequate. We need something that goes deeper, and in order to have something deeper, we have to go to what we say is ad fontes, which is basically back to logos in its inception, and start building up from there. And I think this will cause this will allow us to talk to each other on a higher level, because the problem is if you can't talk, you end up fighting, and if you can't reach an agreement via logos, you're going to have someone impose peace on you in spite of yourself. And that is not just true of the war in the Middle East right now, it is true of India, for example. India is now having a crisis. There's in Delhi, there are campus protests against the RSS BJP student organization, which is basically Hindu fundamentalism. They're trying to impose Hindu fundamentalist ideas on the university. It's not going to work. It does not work, And if you think you're going to force the issue, if you think you can force the issue by military force, all you're going to lead to is civil war, and we're coming close to it in a place like India. Okay, if the BJP continues to promote this Hindu fundamentalism, you're going to end up with civil war. And that's why we have logos, right? To avoid war. And that's what I'm saying. This is the moment that we have, the moment of opportunity that we have now as a result of this military stalemate in the Middle East.
On a practical level, this might be off, but growing up, you could grow up with the concept of logos, because let's say you're spending all day playing with friends and you always have problems and you're always having to logically work your way out of a problem. And somebody would say, they basically say, that's not logical, get out of here. And you would be practiced in working out your problems through dialogue, through reasoning, and logic. Somebody would jump in and say, that reasoning's false. It's not logical.
Yes. And the people who consistently revert to force to settle disputes are known as criminals.
Yeah, because
they cannot communicate. I've seen this. I've dealt with felons in programs, and you can see it's going to get violent. Any type of discussion first of all, it becomes personal. Like what you said really sucks, man. Instead of saying, well, let's just talk about the idea, and it goes from there to there's a threat of a fight right away. This is the problem with criminals. Okay, this is why they're criminals. Okay, this is why they end up in. I don't want to get into that, but I mean, civilized people have the ability to talk, and you say, well, I see your point. Let me modify my point, and we come to some type of agreement. That's what civilization is all about. That's what we need now. We don't need more war. Okay, we don't need more Israeli stooges in Congress. Congress is Israeli-occupied territory. That's the problem with the Congress of the United States of America. Okay, that's Pat Buchanan's term, but it's true. It is Israeli-occupied territory. It's never going to lead to peace when you've got these people like stooges like John McCain and Lindsey Graham agitating for war. They fly over to places like the Ukraine. McCain was there in January telling the Ukrainians to attack the Russians. He was in Libya cheering on those thugs that murdered Gaddafi, calling them freedom fighters.
Well, that's why people voted for Obama, because they didn't want to vote for McCain.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, give him credit. And give Obama credit. He did not listen to the Israel lobby and the Jews and Benjamin Netanyahu, who've been beating the bomb Iran drum for years now. He didn't. He was people like Obama and Admiral Fallon and the unknown grown-ups there who basically resisted this. Why? Because the situation, it would be catastrophic. And I think this is what happened with Flynn. Oh my God, he's declared war on Iran. Get Trump on the phone. And you take him aside and say, look, Donald, I know you like this guy, but, okay, if you attack Iran, Iran takes out the Saudi oil facilities, okay? They close the Persian Gulf. This means oil goes up to $200 a barrel. Who's going to benefit from that? The Russians, of course, because you've been waging oil war on the Russians for years now. You know, gas is under $2 a gallon. That's war against Russia, so this will be the opposite. Didn't you think about that? Well, I guess not. I guess Flynn is playing checkers here, and the rest of the world is playing chess. You know? And this is the problem here. So, you know, we've got this moment. I mean, I hope Trump learns something from what this past experience. I hope the grown-ups in the deep state prevail. I hope that peace prevails.
Now, you mentioned a guy, and you quoted a guy who said the great opportunity right now is the Shiites, because of their philosophical past, have formed a base of lingua franca.
Well, I'm hoping to open up some types. Look, let's face it. If the Shia and the Sunni have been fighting for 1,400 years, what are the odds they're going to resolve their issues now? What are the odds that the Shia, who are Persians, who have a culture that's 2,500 years old, are going to be able to get together with the Saudis, who in 1970, 80% of the Saudis earned their living from animal husbandry, camels and goats. It's one of these divides. It's never going to happen. I'm saying, let's forget about that. The Muslims have never been successful in talking to each other. Let's just put it on hold. Let's take another tack. And I'm saying it would be more fruitful if we were get together and create a Logos Institute at the University of Tehran, whereby at least, you know, the Catholics and the Sunnis could talk to each other. Let's explore a common history of Logos. But this is a distortion because I'm not really talking about Catholics or Sunnis. I'm not interested in talking as a Catholic to a Muslim. I'm interested in talking as one rational being to another rational being, because that is the essence of what we are. And let's try to explore that common denominator for a while. Let's resurrect philosophy. It's dead. It died 1,000 years ago in the Islamic world, and it died when? In the West. Foucault, Derrida, Nietzsche, dead. David Hume, dead. This is not philosophy. They killed it. When did it die? I don't know. Luther, he's another philosophy hater, called reason a whore. See, you have the triumph of will over reason in the West. And so what we need to do is make common cause the people who believe that Logos is superior to will. That's all I'm asking. Let's get these people together and let's sit down and talk and see what we can hammer out. Because what do the Nietzscheans have in common with the ISIS, the Takfiri, the liver eaters, the head chopper offers?
Well, will.
Will.
I mean, the idea is they've imposed, the caliphate's imposed this force upon the Muslims, but the other idea is that a Nietzschean force has been imposed on Americans, you know, psychologically, subversion-wise, so we're just as controlled by will.
That's right. It's exactly the same thing. So that's one alliance. We're arguing for another alliance, and the symbol of my alliance is the Magi, who were Persians. the three wise men from the East, who studied the skies and saw there's a logos here. There's not just random. And they conformed their lives to that logos, which is exactly what St. Paul said you're supposed to do. And when the star appeared, they had the courage to follow the star, and they found the logos incarnate.
Now my example would be Paul goes into the synagogues and he's reasoning from the Old Testament scriptures, and he's trying to persuade them these scriptures are talking about Christ. How he's supposed to suffer and rise on the third day. And of course the Jews never saw it. No. Christ is the first one that opened people's eyes to it. This is really what it's saying. He argues, half the people would agree, half would disagree, and but the main point is he goes from Thessalonica to Berea. And the Bereans listen. And it says the Bereans listened to Paul, they weighed what he was saying, compared it to Scripture, and it says the Bereans were more noble than the Thessalonians. Yeah. And I see that's where the courage is.
Yeah.
It took some courage. I mean, courage might have been...
It's not for the faint-hearted. This is not for the faint-hearted, faint of heart.
But you had... Christ is not found that easy in the Old Testament. Just like it's not easy to find Christ and follow the logos and the stars. It took some...
No, it takes effort.
Yes.
Obviously, it takes effort. And I'm saying, I said it on Iranian TV this time, the Iranians were astronomers and philosophers when my ancestors were chasing pigs through the forests of Germany. But they have an ancient tradition, and this is, I see the possibility of resurrecting this ancient tradition now. That's my hope.
And it's mainly because the Shiites have taken in part of that Persian past.
They're Persians. They're not Arabs. There's a difference. There's a difference.
And so they're open to...
Well, we'll see. I don't know. That's my hope. I mean, that's up. I make a proposal. Man proposes and God disposes. So we'll see what happens.
But like you talked about going into India, into the Catholic schools, I mean, you have an example of that because 80% of the students in the Catholic schools in India
are Hindus.
Are Hindus.
And what do they want from me? What do they ask me? Can you prove the existence of God? So you have this thirst for logos all over the world because that's what we are. And
Right.
he's confronted with an inadequate culture that is basically, you know, it's the same. It's like Western technology and polytheistic religions.
But that question is the main question because Norway, my understanding, is like 30% atheist. England is now 30% atheist. That question is really a big question.
I've had success talking to white guys too. The white guys invite me to speak. They're kind of tending toward a kind of neo-paganism because all they perceive is the failure of Christianity, the major failing being the Reformation in countries like Scandinavian countries. So they haven't been introduced to it. But I'm saying the Logos is out there. It just takes some type of effort, and it will succeed. That's my hope. That's my prediction.
Can you say anything about Iran? We don't have much time, a couple minutes. Can you say anything about the Iranian people, what it was like over there?
Yeah, I mean, you go to a mosque and they're all praying to God. Pace, Cardinal Burke, they are praying to God. You know, their understanding is different than ours, but they're praying to the same God. And that's worth something, it seems to me. So why do you want to kill them? Why does Rick Santorum want to drop bombs on them? Why do they want to do that? Solely because Israel is determining our foreign policy. That's the only reason that these people are acting this way. Let's break through this sinister conspiracy here, and let's let the Americans get together with the Iranians.
Well, this should have been a fundamental concept of Trump's Make America First, because this is not making America first.
This is not consistent
This is making
with
Israel
America
first.
This is Israel first. Donald's got to get it straight here. It's either Israel first or it's America first. You can't have it both ways.
Right, and foreign policy, that's what George Washington said in his farewell address, is that don't allow yourself to be entangled.
Absolutely. That's the American tradition. We need to get back to that tradition.
We only got a couple minutes left. You were on Iranian TV a lot. I know you're, nobody in South Bend knows this. I mean, you're not.
Now they know. Now now the secret is out.
Right. This is going to be in the April edition of Culture Wars.
Right.
The title of this show and your article is Apocalypse Deferred. I imagine that was Flynn not bombing Iran.
Right.
And then how the situation in the Middle East has changed.
Right.
And partly because the new technology and Netanyahu couldn't invade Lebanon or he was going to face serious consequences.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of the change, but there's many changes here.
Right. Opportunities abound here.
Right. And from a Christian point of view, obviously there's opportunities here too, because now you have more open dialogue is what you're seeing.
Yes.
And that should be encouraging for anybody that's serious about wanting to spread the gospel. You know, the logos, the gospel that the Magi discovered. Okay, this is the show Israel. And of course, we believe that the Israel in the Middle East is Israel after the flesh, St. Paul might say, and it's the Israel after the Spirit that we talk about. The church, those who have been called out, those who have been enlightened. In Hebrews it says, been illuminated to the knowledge that Jesus is the Christ of the Old Testament, is the prophesied one who Revelation has revealed to us is God in the flesh. And that's infinite. I mean,
amen, brother.
That's infinite. When you think about somebody came to this earth and was God. You have complete fulfillment, intellectually, psychologically. It says we are complete in Him. And it also says, don't be led astray by vain philosophy. You know, so philosophy has to be guided by the scriptures that reveal Christ to us. I mean, there is one scripture that comes to my mind. It says, in the wisdom of God, man through wisdom did not come to know God, but it pleased God through the foolishness of the message to save those who believe. So those scriptures are guiding how we reason these things. You know, it helps guide what true wisdom is.
Philosophy left to its own, I said this before, logos degenerated. It was saved by the church. But there is a logos that is transcendent, more than we can know. But we can approximate it.
Okay. This is Dr. E. Michael Jones on the show Israel. Till next time, Peter Helen.